It is an ideological game for the people who get the profits to convince the people who do the work that the most important thing is the profit. That's a swindle. That's childish. That should be understood for the ideological self-serving of the people at the top. I think the genius of Marx was to say the same logic can and should apply to the organization of the workplace. It doesn't need a king. It doesn't need a CEO. It doesn't need an emperor at the top. It doesn't need him to be there. It doesn't need him to become a billionaire. I've been a professor of economics at the university all my life. What China has achieved in the last 30 to 40 years, the transformation from one of the poorest countries on this planet to an economic powerhouse, is extraordinary. The argument that there is something unfair about competition between the state and private enterprise is a very strange criticism, because in Britain and the United States, and indeed wherever you have private enterprise, you have terribly unfair competition between large corporations and small ones. The history of every capitalist country, including the United States, past and present, is a bitter, and I underscore that for you, a bitter struggle and conflict between large corporate enterprise and small ones. The small ones are always explaining how they are unfairly treated by big business. It is a theme. It has been a core part of the politics of every capitalist country. In fact, if you study the actual history of capitalist countries in Western Europe and North America, you will know that the small businesses have often mobilized to control the government in order to have the government reduce the unfair treatment they get from big businesses. For example, in France, the working class, the labor unions, have organized with small business. The left wing in French politics, which did very well last Sunday, got 28% of the vote. That's an alliance between workers and medium and small businesses. They oppose the right wing of Macron because he is the leader of big business. And now I put on my hat as a Marxist. I would argue that one of the great lessons of Karl Marx, I would argue that what the future of Marxism and socialism are about is a transformation, a change in the organization of the workplace, the factory, the office, the store, whether it is owned and operated by private individuals or it's owned and operated by the government. In both cases, the Marxist argument is we do not need and we do not want a small group of people at the top of this workplace making all the decisions, being in a position to hire or fire all of us who are employees, telling us what to do, how to do it, when to do it, deciding how well we do it. That is not democratic, and that is not necessary. And that human communities used to think they needed to have a king or an emperor or a czar who made all the political decisions. I think the genius of Marx was to say the same logic can and should apply to the organization of the workplace. It doesn't need a king. It doesn't need a CEO. It doesn't need an emperor at the top. It doesn't need him to be there. It doesn't need him to become a billionaire. If you look at the dispersion of billionaires in the world, the two countries with the most billionaires are the United States and China. If we make the power in the people, in the workplace, at the bottom of society, that the factory be run democratically, one person, one vote, the same for the office, the same for the store, that we give people the power over their own work and labor, that's the breakthrough. It's a democratization of work. That's why we call our organization, Democracy at Work. And we think it's the best way for the United States to cope with the relocation of capitalism away. The idea that profit is the key is a misunderstanding. And let me assure you, as an economist again, corporations in the West that have maximized profit have not done as well in the long run as corporations who didn't. I can see it over and over again. In the United States, one of the great heroes, Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, so he is a cultural hero, Mr. Musk. Okay, now what kind of a person is he? He has more children than he can remember, with as many different women as he has had relationships with. He was devoted to making a killing with his car. But Tesla is now in trouble because, for example, BYD in China produces a better electric car than Tesla can do. And that is changing the whole business. The key issue is, how are you shaping your whole economy? Look, every capitalist corporation eventually disappears. They all maximize their profit. General Motors and Ford maximize their profit, but they're disappearing as automobile companies. That was not their success. It didn't do that. So it's a little bit of an ideological trap. When you maximize your profit, you typically economize on other expenditures. And you do not know whether that is the right thing to do or not. I'll give you an example. Imagine a corporation that lowered its profits in order to provide really first-class childcare to its workers, so that every worker could bring his or her children to work because they would be well fed, well clothed, have lots of learning activities, and be happy together with other children. Okay? They would hurt their profit, but they would do something spectacular for their workers. Okay. Now, 2 years later or 5 years later, a crisis happens in the world market. Somebody else produces a better whatever it is this company did. And now the company turns to its workers and it says, we need your help to survive this crisis. You know what? They're going to get much more help from people whose children have been taken well care of. They will realize later that it was a mistake to have maximized profit at the expense of your larger situation. For every company that you show me that has done well because it maximized profit, I will show you one that fell apart because it maximized profit. It is pro-capitalist ideology to think that maximizing profit is some sort of guaranteed arrival at the best situation. That was never true. And let me get it for you in a slightly different way. If you think about a capitalist corporation, any corporation, the revenue this company gets, it divides into different parts. Part of the revenue replaces the tools and equipment used up in production. Another part of the revenue pays the wages of the workers. And another part of the revenue goes to the investors and to the top executives as profits. All of those people participate in making that corporation successful. You therefore should maximize what you pay your suppliers. You should maximize what you pay your workers, the wages, and you should maximize profits. Why only one? All of them are needed. It is an ideological game for the people who get the profits to convince the people who do the work that the most important thing is the profit. That's a swindle. That's childish. That should be understood for the ideological self-serving of the people at the top. That's why we are required in universities to teach business school graduates the importance of maximizing profit. It's no different than telling you the important thing that makes your business successful is if you go to the church and you talk to Jesus about your business. People used to do that, and they used to think that speaking with Jesus was the route to success. Well, maximizing profit is just another variation on talking to Jesus. It's not the guarantee of anything. What it does do is make everything else less important than the people at the top. And that's what they want you to think. But don't be fooled.